Welcome to Masterclass with Aaron Sheley. I'm sitting here with four of my favorite silent films, and I want to explain to you something. You don't have to like silent films when you're learning about movies and even dreaming about movies. And if you've got something against them because they're outdated, hey, I'm not going to argue with you. But a true history buff of film, whether they're kind of annoyed that there's no silent, that they're all silence but with orchestras is interesting, but that characters rarely were audibly spoken for, even though there were sometimes narrators in the early silent films. But we all know that Nickelodeons are the small machines you could look in and move pictures that were the first in America, but they were all invented on the big screen way before that in 1895, December 12th, by the Lumiere brothers. And then this disc here is Melier the Magician. Now, this is a hard one to find because you have to track this down from so many sources that Amazon will tell you it's out of print, and then they'll ship you a copy anyway that you have to pay extra for, but it's worth it because it's like this really valuable DVD, and it has about 15 or 20 of Melier's short films, and they're all pretty good intact. Some of them have some of the wrinkles of time that film falls apart and dies. Was originally the idea for even Tin Pan Alley to do it like a Burning Man thing and blow up all the movies after they basically forced the director at gunpoint to work on the movies. And the thing is the director signed up for that. So I don't know. That's kind of what the early Hollywood was like, but not really so much in the silent era. Although Méliès is given credit as being the earliest silent films we can basically find by a director whose most of his work was salvaged, and that they did so much good in France to salvage film material is a testament to why these early Méliès movies are so famous, and the fact that Martin Scorsese uses them in his movie Hugo is interesting because I thought that was an animated movie, and then there were robots animating movies, which, yeah. And then there's. Now, this is the next movie I have that's further up the list from a feature film made in the silent era, but the first feature film from the silent era, as I think David Bordwell is approaching to say maybe, is the story of the Kelly Gang in Australia. Now, the story of the Kelly Gang has only been restored in film by a process where they put chemical across the film that's meant to expire at first, and now they're trying to save it so future audiences can see it. And that wasn't conceived is kind of strange because that was conceived even by Edison when he was patenting things that they could never figure out how. I'm not sure that the chemicals came around through any lab accident, but they did know ways of reviving film, that they knew certain films would deteriorate from others and why some do and some don't, and why you try to prioritize things by time, and that has nothing to do with it. It's kind of a science none of us have figured out now. But anyways, with this, but they're trying to. They're paying for archives and restorations, and I thank them all. But this is Inferno and music by Tangerine Dream. And Tangerine Dream didn't come around until the 80s techno movement when they were doing all that British pop jubilee American new wave stuff. And music by Tangerine, this is hideous. This is the Inferno by, it doesn't even say Dante's Inferno. It says Inferno. Is it Giuseppe Ruggiero's Inferno? Or is it the Inferno story of Italy that they somehow want to persecute all their leaders again and put them in hell? And that's how leaders use propaganda movies to promote themselves? But that no other feature film really exists on disc? Then maybe this and a handful of short films that there are short films from earlier times than this, though, that are available. I will clarify because uh, you have short films by D.W. Griffith through Biograph, and once again, once they left Tin Pan Alley, which they were making these crazy hit one wonders, and everyone wanted to see them again, so they try and make the same movie, and the friends kind of had this Grand Guignol thing that was so horrific that it was kind of like that too, and that's where Louis Fouillard worked. So he had done a feature film, but that's after Inferno. And then Inferno's 1911 is such a testament to how Italians like to ham things up, whether it's real or not. We all know hell isn't real because nobody can prove hell is real, and that's why it's absurd to even write a book about hell. Because how can you tell if hell is real if you've been there in real life? Well, what if someone comes up to you and says, "Well, it's worse than real life"? Because I seen the Italian movie about it, and it's worse than life, and that's why I love it. It's one of the bad movies that were good. It makes trauma look tame. And I work for trauma, and I gotta say, if you can't pump it up to Inferno level, then we ain't gonna have no regulation, deregulation, because this should be seen by all and scare them away from film history, because it looks like a real hell, and it's the Italians putting it on like it's real. And if you don't believe it's real, I'll send you to Italy, where they're still reenacting this. Where they reenact everything in Italy, whether it's real or not, man. You don't have to be real or not, by the way. Being real is a rule that you can always use. I'm going to skip ahead to this movie, which I don't know. It's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and if you can't see that, there's a somnambulist on the cover. And what's interesting is I wrote this book a while ago, and it won some prizes, won the Pulitzer Prize, and there was this thing in it about how it had this ghost mobile, like this kind of Caligari sense to it toward the end, and I didn't even know my writing partner from a movie I had done was thinking about writing a shot-by-shot book of Caligari, and I'm thinking, well, if Javier makes Caligari, I'll have to make something else, and we had already heard of each other's filmmakers, and we worked together in my small town of Grand Junction, but that Grand Junction is the home of Dalton Trumbo. Makes me not as impressive of a Pulitzer winner as him, because his politics are much more well studied and much more clarified than mine will be in describing. This is the film without politics, but suddenly caused Nazism later in the book. Now, if there's this film critic named Siegfried Krakauer and his favorite movie is Caligari, why is he blaming the Nazis on Caligari? That he's one of those regular Nazis that goes for and against the Nazis with or without pressure, doesn't matter to anyone, that he's German and he's following his government's orders, and that's what we do everywhere. But this one doesn't have anything to do with that. It's about some guy that had a nightmare in an insane asylum and got it out to everyone, and now everyone compares it to psychology. Well, maybe there are messages in movies about psychology, but this isn't even about like the induction of evil or anything. It's about some Luciferian guy that even admits he's Lucifer, tricks a hospital clerk into hypnotizing one of the patients, keeps him in a closet, keeps him sleepwalking, opens his eyes, he's still asleep, can't tell if he's asleep or awake, goes into his room. The professor acts like he makes him hurt somebody. He stopped from it. Whether he does or not, I'm not going to spoil it. And there's one more thing I got to say. That the professor wakes up and thinks it's all a dream after he's about to be locked up for almost getting caught as the real guy that made the somnambulist do it. Then how in the heck is the other guy witnessing the story from within his dream, telling the story? And I don't think that's to deal with the authorship dilemma, which we'll get into a later episode about Truffaut later, but we've got a little bit more time, so I'm going to show the most venerated film of the silent era. And this is all the way at the end. The Caligari is like in the middle of the silent era when nobody's making films about anything, and then Nazis rise. And then Charlie Chaplin, who didn't know about the Nazi thing in 1929, wasn't part of the same deal that Caligari was part of. So Krakauer is like this theorist that's like conforming to international theory that we've got to have this legend that Caligari, whether good or bad, led to Hitler. Well, I want to tell you, he would have made the great dictator first, because he had that script in mind before the Third Reich did rise. And I think most of those horror directors went with Fritz Lang to America, and nobody was really allowed to direct propaganda for Hitler except for Leni Riefenstahl. And Billy Wilder and Fritz Lang made it to America, but they weren't really enemies of Chaplin either early on when they used to have film club tours together. And this is Chaplin himself. The legend that built UA was D.W. Griffith, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks. He was in early 1918, Tilly's Punctured Romance, maybe earlier, 1916, some say. And I'm thinking he's in a Mabel Normand movie where she's taken over as the lead director, and somehow there are women directors earlier in the silent era that take so much deep research to find that you can't even remember all the names you have to study within the silent film group. And some point you reach this like silent film thing, but Charlie Chaplin never wanted to leave the silent film behind, and that's why he made City Lights, because in City Lights he directed it with the cameras, everything, so it was absorbing natural light from wherever he was standing in the city. It was the lighting design that he called it City Lights, but that his girlfriend was blind and she couldn't see, and that she opens her eyes for the first time, and this is what she's blind to, and she doesn't even really mind him, but that she feels bad that she didn't like redeem him even more is making her sad. And it's not that she doesn't want to, or that they have a bad relationship, or that they're not ready or anything. They just don't know how to react to each other, and it's an emotion that you'll see only one other time in one other film, and it's Annie Hall when he kind of, or Manhattan, when he kind of makes that smirk at the end. Pardon me, Woody Allen, didn't mean to mix it up. There's one in there too, but he makes this kind of half a smile. Brooke Shields, and she's kind of like, well, does that? And it's like the reverse City Lights, because he's kind of like, I don't know, should I have loved you more? And she's like, I don't know. I remember who you are, and maybe I should have loved you more. And you're thinking, that's reverse City Lights in Manhattan, and it's basically the same kind of movie as City Lights. But Woody Allen never knows what movie he's parodying, especially when it's a parody of a parody, until it's explained by someone like me. But now that we're almost run out of time, we thank you for not saying that Annie Hall one, because I'm saving that for later. But you see this flower basket down here, this girl is blind, and he goes on all these adventurous odd jobs that we're laughing at him, and not even in an uncomfortable way, that we're laughing at him, and he's doing these menial jobs and making fun of him is how he critiques how those jobs are hard, but he doesn't hate them in kind of this like poor way of saying he'd rather work on a shipyard than not have work at all, is one way of saying he likes to work even if it is the depression. And especially to save this girl's eyes for blindness, and there's no like pickpocketer who's stealing from his mom. He's doing it the honest way. And then some guy gives him money, wants it back, which isn't like a regular pattern. The guy was drunk. I've never been anywhere where somebody's given me money, asked for it back. But should he have taken it? Probably, because the guy gives it back to him. And if he's on again, off again, is kind of, well, not a normal behavior, but that he tries to give it back, that Charlie Chaplin tries to give the money back, and the money's hoisted on him, and then later he comes looking for it, makes it clear that he could have taken that as an honest citizen, even without getting the cops involved, who were pissed that this immigrant homeless guy got a job at all. And when they find out he cured a blind lady with the money, they don't really care. And I don't think Charlie Chaplin was saying that's how I've been pushed around, but he could have been saying that's how the poor get pushed around sometime. But Charlie Chaplin made it funny, and we still like to work, and we have to work. And I thank you for coming by, because that's not all I wanted to say about City Lights. It is redeemably an amazing score, and it has redeemably amazing sound effects. That Chaplin did help direct it and write it, proves that he's an early auteur, that he founded UA to produce it is totally true, and that it was a Hollywood film venerates it as the last silent film of all time, basically, even though Charlie Chaplin made another silent film called Modern Times. Now, the thing about City Lights is that nobody knows that in 1930, almost every theater in the world was wired, except for like some places in South America and Japan had kept it silent because Ozu was like Chaplin. They could render better visuals in the silent era, which all the visuals they renovated in the sound era with Legendary Tune we'll talk about later. Thank you. You attended Masterclass with Aaron Sheley.